Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Chasing Psychological Safety. Today, we're going to be talking about a theoretical topic again to a degree, but it has practical applications and applications that we have to urgently look into, which is, as we know, we've just crossed a good period where there has been a couple of things that have made us believe we should be optimistic about the rest of the year, such as a number of announcements regarding the vaccine. So it looks like we're going to get out of this at least by mid next year. We're going to be fine. But until then, and while this rolls out, obviously we still have some very difficult periods to cross. Now, from the point of view of how do we prepare for the next steps? I think what's important is to realize that we have to still draw from those reserves of resilience. So it would be nice if we really took time to take care of ourselves as from the point of view of the work that we have to do as individuals and as teams. But from an organizational point of view, if we're going to look at it, what do we do as HR? What do we do as leadership? What do we do as leaders of people to make sure we go through this in the right way? I think it's really important that we take a step back and we go back to those fundamentals in terms of what is work, first and foremost, right? So the number one thing that we need to do is make sure that we have redefined this openly, blue sky. We've talked about this multiple times, that we must have a good 10 videos and articles saying just that. Ask again, what does work mean to us? What does good look like for us? What are the outcomes we're looking for? Do we have that type of OKRs, KPIs, measurements in place at the end of our efforts to be sure that we've done the right thing? Do we know that our customers have loved them? What are the outcomes to our work? Because unless you are able to truly go back to those fundamentals, really redefine what you're trying to do and how you're trying to do it, you're going to find it that is really difficult to understand how to fit into this new reality of hybrid. And this is where we wanted to bring you to, which is a lot of people are talking about potentially going back to the office. That is a ridiculous mistake. You don't need us to tell you that. I'm sure everyone has the common sense to know we should not be losing what we have gained over this period in terms of people being able to understand the nature of work and split it into their heads between individual work and common work, focused work and creative work, meetings and online meetings. All of those things are distinctions we need to make. We can only make those distinctions if we have done the work on what does good look for us and what are the outcomes of our work.
And speaking of not losing what we've gained in the last, what is nearly 12 months now, can you believe it? Talking about purpose and the personal responsibility that the people in our teams have shown in the last little while when times have been so hard, and how to keep purpose powering the personal responsibility in our teams. We think it's so important that as a team leader and as people in a team, you spend the time really focusing on what emotionally connects you to the work that you do. That's the only way, or it's one of the most critical, most effective ways that you can get people to connect to the work that we do and to really give everything that we've got to that work. It creates that idea, that sense of personal responsibility for a person, that sense of accountability to the work that they do, because they're intrinsically tied to why they're doing it. It's really important to acknowledge that people have taken a huge amount of personal responsibility and they found purpose in times when when people could very easily have hidden away, and we probably wouldn't have blamed them because things have been so difficult, but people have really shown up. Lots of teams have really taken way more responsibility than we could even have expected of them. So now is the time to acknowledge that and to spend even more time powering them into 2021 by reconnecting with that purpose. And the new year is actually always a really good time to do that. So that's another really critical thing to be doing at the moment.
Very true. And obviously, since we're here and since we're talking about this topic, the number one thing you need to do, and we'll always say this until the day we die, I think it's going to be potentially in our epitaph of sorts. The number one thing you can do if you want to succeed is to make sure that your teams have a happy and healthy dynamic so that they are productive, meaning that they have psychological safety. So obviously, if you want any kind of productivity going forward in this new environment, you have to focus on the one thing that you can affect, which is at the bubble team level, a healthy, productive environment that comes from having psychological safety. And to reiterate what we were saying earlier, to be clear, we believe the future is hybrid, without a doubt. We've also been saying that for the last 6 months or so. How that hybrid is, what kind of forms it will take, what the proportion of work is, where people should meet and when, and all of that can be discussed. And that depends on the outcomes. It depends on the type of enterprise. It depends on many things. But what is immutably the case across the board is that each of these teams, irrespective of when they meet, how they meet, where they work or where they don't work, have to have psychological safety. The one thing that's going to really shake that psychological safety is if you really drag them back into the office without any of this conversation. Obviously, most people that we're talking to today wouldn't be doing that. But irrespective of where they are, even if you do drag them back into the office, productivity will no longer be looking over the shoulder of anyone, will no longer be how many meetings are you coming to. It will always be a question of, is this team psychologically safe enough to be creating together, to be working together in a way that's making magic or not?
Yeah. And that brings us on really directly to the idea of trust versus command and control. One of the main topics of discussion for hybrid teams, as that reality has become a permanent one in the last, say, 3 to 6 months, as we've realized that all of our teams are going to be, to some extent, permanently or part-time hybrid teams. We have realized, and leaders have realized, and teams have realized, that command and control doesn't work in the virtual or hybrid environment. And it never has worked. We know that. We've been saying that forever. So what we need to look at now is how we can build trust in our teams as leaders, how we can make trust a core part of our skill set, a core part of our ways of working. How do we build trust into our behaviors with our teams behaviors with each other, those group behavioral norms, but also how we build trust into our patterns of working and how we enable and empower people, be that in the office or out of the office. It couldn't be more important, and it's going to be the future for teams.
So last one we're going to be giving you today, again, is focus on feedback loops, real ones. Focus on real dialogue. Get that back and forth going in a serious way. Don't unexamine things. Don't leave them as they were. The existing mechanism you had where you ask something once a year were not that great, to put it mildly, to begin with, but they will not serve this new reality of hybrid. So the only thing that's worth doing is spending time on understanding, when we ask, do we really hear? Do we say back what we've asked, what we've heard? And that goes for everyone. When you ask your client, do you hear? Do you then react through your agile ways of work? When you ask your employees, do you ask well enough? Do you ask often enough? Do they know you've heard? What's the feedback loop there? How do you close it? And lastly, when you as management or leadership or whatever it is, speak to your people, do they hear you? Is there a real two-way conversation here that's a closed loop? So to recap, if you're in a leadership position or you're an organization trying to figure out how to move into hybrid, and make no mistake about it, hybrid is the only way to go. There's not going to be like this never happened, return to the office type of time. Go back to what is work for us. What are our outcomes? What are we attempting to get out of this? Go back to purpose in a very deep way, because that will power your people's ability to be personally responsible and actually show up for you. And that's the only way you're going to make them show up. And then make sure that you have psychological safety in teams. That will make your teams want to do this because it's fun, because it's creative, because it's safe to be speaking to each other. Make sure that you understand that trust and empowerment is better than command and control. You'll feel better. They'll feel better. It's a whole new world of servant leadership out there that's worth exploring. And lastly, the dialogue and feedback loops have to be closed. They have to be tied. And if you do these things, which sound very simple on paper, but they're really very complicated and take a lot of work, then you're probably going to be recession-proof going forward. You're going to have come out of COVID with a lot of wins. And ideally, next year is going to be a great one for all of us. Thank you for listening to us, and we'll talk to you next week.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye.